My name is Presley, and for my 3D model project for the Anatomy and Physiology class, I decided to make each different model of each tissue out of beauty products like jewelry and makeup. So to start off here, we have epithelial tissue. I decided to specifically make stratified squamous epithelial tissue out of this necklace. Stratified squamous epithelial tissue is the most common type of stratified epithelial. It protects the underlying tissues from things like cuts and abrasion. When it's non-keratinized, it can be found in the lining of internal cavities like the esophagus that lead to the outside. Each of the pancake-like shaped of cells here of the necklace represent the cytoplasms, and each specific hole in each cell represents the individual nuclei. I also know that underneath stratified squamous epithelial tissue, there is always connective tissue, and I realized that the carpet here kind of looks like adipose connective tissue, as it is usually empty looking. Other types of epithelial tissue include simple. There is simple squamous, simple cuboidal, and simple columnar epithelial. There's also different types of stratified epithelial tissue, such as cuboidal and columnar, but it is very rare in the human body. Moving on to connective tissue, I decided to model a specific type of connective tissue proper. This is dense connective tissue, and more specifically, it is dense regular connective tissue. As you can see, each hair clip is parallel to one another, moving in the same direction. These represent the fibers that are present in dense regular tissue, and each screw represents each individual nuclei as well. The fibers continue in the same direction to allow strength and resistance to stretching in the directions of their orientation. Dense regular tissue is found in between muscles and bones of ligaments and tendons, and it provides points of attachment to allow pull and reduce friction in the muscles. Other types of connective tissue include loose connective tissue, like adipose tissue. There's also supportive connective tissue, which is bone and cartilage, and fluid connective tissue, which is blood and lymph. Next, we have muscle tissue. I decided to make skeletal muscle tissue, which contracts to make possible motion like facial expressions and posture, as well as any other voluntary movement of the body. Skeletal muscle cells are also called myocytes, and it's striated, which can be seen under a microscope as well. There are many nuclei squeezed along the membranes as it's multinucleated, and each of the words on each makeup brush here represents those multiple nuclei. The skeletal muscle is also surrounded by connective tissue as well. Other types of muscle tissue are cardiac muscle tissue, which is found in the heart, and smooth muscle tissue, which is found in places such as digestive tracts and reproductive systems. The last tissue is nervous tissue, which is excitable, and it sends and receives signals that provides the body with information from both the inside and the outside. This nervous tissue is made up of neurons and neuroglial cells. The neurons are what detect the information and send through the electromagnetic signals to the brain, while the neuroglial cells just support the neurons. Each different makeup jar here represents the axons from a higher point, and each bracelet wrapped around the makeup jars represents the myelin sheath that protects them and speeds up the action potential reaction. I also decided to make a neuron for the nervous tissue representation. To start off here, at the very top of the neuron are the dendrites, which receive information from other neurons. Those connect to the cell body, which contains the nucleus, and determines whether the neuron will fire that action potential for the information or not. The axon here transmits the message to other neurons through the action potential, while the myelin sheath that surrounds it speeds up that reaction and protects the message. Down here we have more earrings, which represent the terminal buttons or the axon terminals that ends the message and splits the axon to connect to the synapse, which is the gap between the neurons where they will communicate. Lastly, here is the model of the skin. The skin and its accessory structures make up the integumentary system, which provides the body with overall protection of its organs. There is the epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis of the skin. To start off with the epidermis, we have 5 layers. Here are the 5 layers out of necklaces, starting with the stratum corneum, stratum lucidium, which is only found in thick skin, stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, and stratum basal. Here we have the surface of the skin made out of more makeup brushes. This makeup product here represents the hair follicle, the hair shaft, which sticks up from the surface of the skin, the hair root, and the hair bulb. On top of the hair, we also have the sebaceous oil gland, the erector pili muscle. Over here, we have the eccrine sweat gland and the apocrine sweat gland, the myciner corpuscle, and the dermal papilla spikes right here. The skin's accessory structures are very important to its function, so we'll now go into deeper detail about each specific structure and its function for the skin itself. We'll start off with the 5 layers of the epidermis. The stratum corneum, which as mentioned before is the most superficial layer of the epidermis, and it protects against abrasion from the more delicate and underlying structures. Here the stratum lucidium is only found in thick skin. Here the stratum granulosum appears grainy due to the changes in large amounts of protein and keratin that's produced in this layer. The stratum spinosum makes skin flexible and it's very spiny to be able to do that. And lastly, the stratum basal here is the deepest layer of the epidermis, and it attaches the epidermis to continuously generate new skin cells by cell division. The dermal papilla here allows for a stronger bond between the epidermis and the dermis. Moving on to the hair follicle. The hair follicle allows the production of hair growth underneath the skin's surface, and the hair root at the bottom and the hair bulb also do the same thing by connecting to the erector pili muscle. The erector pili muscle causes hair to stand upright and gives goosebumps. The sebaceous gland on top of the hair follicle produces a substance that provides a protective coating for your skin to help retain its moisture. Moving on to the sweat glands. The apocrine sweat gland is found in the armpits and the groin near the apical surfaces. And the eccrine sweat gland is found almost everywhere else in the body and is done through exocytosis that requires energy. And lastly, the myciner corpuscle contains nerve endings that are responsible for transmitting very fine and discriminative touch. And that is the detailed structures of the skin.